The anime opens with an all-out war between a dragon and a few dozen soldiers called the Saviors. I won't lie, for everyone to get out of their comfort zone and be ready to do just anything for this battle, then that dragon should be level 999 plus. Everyone was in on this battle and the dragon was getting his behind handed back to him. Lancers, archers, swordmasters, mages, everyone was in on this battle, and every time the dragon flapped his wings, it took damage. The dragon was frozen and it hit the ground hard, but not long after it was back in the air. All this time, the MVP has been preparing a spell that will send this dragon back to whence it came. The spell is about ready and this dragon is about to get cooked. The MVP and the dragon went head to head and the battle was explosive. We're thrown back all the way to 6 months ago, but before we do that, let me introduce you to our protagonist, Moroha, a guy who thought he was just another unlucky reincarnated soul until he realized he's actually way too OP for this world. Waking up in a new life with memories of his past, he's got insane magic, ridiculous sword skills, and enough power to break the game balance, but of course the world immediately slaps a giant target on his back. Now, 6 months earlier, the principal was giving a speech, and what does this farm animal do? He falls asleep. This fool dreams of one of his past lives, where he was some kind of legendary swordsman, and guess what? He was shamelessly in love with his own sister. And right when they were about to lock lips in his dream, he gets a rude awakening. A pink-haired girl named Suki headbutts him because apparently she is allergic to peace. As Moroha blinks, still half asleep, he sees Suki's face and immediately recognizes her as his long-lost sister from his dream. This donkey-brained fool calls her by his past life's sister's name, and guess what? She bursts into tears. She remembers him too. She hugs him, calls him brother, and he just stares at her like a confused goat because, surprise, surprise, he doesn't remember anything from his past life. Before they can even process this nonsense, they notice a girl named Shizuno knocked out on the floor, probably snorted too much chalk powder. They rush over to help her, but the second she sees Moroha, she instantly recognizes him as her past life husband. And what does she do? She kisses him right then and there. Suki is standing right there, watching all of this unfold, and she is furious. She yanks them apart like a jealous girlfriend and goes off on Shizuno, demanding to know why she's kissing her brother. Shizuno, being a queen of chaos, fires back, asking why she cares, and Suki, in peak delusional energy, declares that she loves Moroha because family should come first. This is getting out of hand already. Later, the students gather in class where everyone has to introduce themselves. Suki, the walking megaphone, stands up and proudly declares that she wants to be everyone's friend and the strongest person in the school. She tells them all to follow her, but instead of applause, she gets pure disgusted stares. Her social life dies instantly. She quietly sits down in shame, realizing that maybe yelling at people isn't the best way to make friends. Then it's time for practical magic class. For some reason, they all show up at the arena wearing swimsuits, because that's totally normal. The teacher, a professional disappointment, explains that there are two types of power, light and dark. He then does a little flashy spell to change his outfit, like some kind of magical fashion show contestant. The students are impressed, but like every bad teacher ever, instead of actually teaching them, he just says they should figure it out themselves. The students start trying to summon their battle suits, but they all look like they're struggling on the toilet. Suki, of course, being a show-off, does it instantly. Not only that, she picks up another girl and spins her around like a basketball because that's totally necessary. As Suki is showing off, she overhears an ugly goblin trash-talking the class. This guy is out here wishing for a monster attack so that only talented newcomers like him can fight on the front lines. Suki, who has the patience of a chihuahua, marches up to him and starts lecturing him on being a better human. The guy, having no patience for her nonsense, immediately summons his battle suit and prepares for a fight. The teacher, being more useless than Sakura, just lets them go at it. They pull out their weapons, and Suki charges at the guy with her sword, but he blocks all her attacks like it's nothing. She tries again, but he's faster and knocks her sword right out of her hands. He taunts her, telling her to pick it up, but as she turns around, he lands a brutal hit on her back, sending her crashing to the ground. Suki, now crying in shame, gets comforted by Moroha, who covers her up like some dramatic hero. The ugly goblin laughs at Moroha, calling him a loser who can't even summon his own battlesuit. But Moroha just stands there watching Suki run away in embarrassment, saying nothing like the useless cow he is. To cheer her up, he takes her to a cafe, where Suki, between tears, admits that she never really wanted to be a hero. She just wanted to look cool in front of him, but instead she ended up looking like a complete clown, and now all she can do is cry. Seeing her this way turns Moroha into a complete simp, and in an act of pure stupidity, he challenges the ugly fool to a fight that evening. This absolute brain-dead goat knows he's going to lose, but he still does it. The guy, amused, throws out a bunch of weapons and tells him to pick one. Moroha grabs a sword while the other guy just rips off his dog tag and summons a giant axe. The fight begins and the guy instantly smacks Moroha into the air with a single strike. Moroha gets up, quickly realizing he can barely keep up. The ugly fool moves so fast it's like fighting the Flash. Like the stubborn farm animal he is, he gets up and starts swinging his sword wildly, demanding an apology for Suki. The ugly fool easily blocks everything before delivering a devastating hit that shatters Moroha's sword into pieces. He picks up his broken sword and charges again, only to be slammed into the ground repeatedly. It's like watching a cow trying to fight a lion. The guy eventually disarms him completely and prepares to finish him off. Just as the final blow is about to land, Moroha has a flashback of his past life as the legendary swordsman. He suddenly remembers his promise to Suki that he would never lose. Meanwhile, Suki and Shizuno are watching the match, and Suki, desperate to motivate him, yells that she'll give him a kiss if he wins. This this is all the motivation that all men and this dumb goat need. And just like that, his brain finally starts working. He instinctively grabs his dog tag, transforming it into a sword. He charges at the punk with an incredible speed, and no matter how hard the punk tries, he is unable to hit Moroha, who dodges every single attack like he's using ultra instincts. Their weapons clash, and Moroha ends up breaking the punk's axe, who falls to the ground from the impact. Moroha collapses as well, confused about how a pathetic loser like him can win. Some pretty lady who arrived mid-fight seems to recognize him, though. Moroha wakes up to find some random girl hovering over him, and before he can even process what's happening, she kisses him. This cow barely understands what's going on when she suddenly runs to hide behind the principal. The principal, instead of questioning why a random girl is stealing kisses like it's a hobby, casually informs Moroha that she was just replenishing his lost mana. The goat is now panicking, thinking the FBI might be on his tail even though he did absolutely nothing. The principal, being the enabler she is, assures him that nobody will ever know. The cow still feels uneasy, but before he can process this nonsense, Suki starts screaming. It turns out the principal tied her up to stop her from committing any indecent acts. Good move. The principal tries to explain something important, but Moroha, being the barn animal that he is too distracted by the two big reasons in front of him. She tells him that he is special and different from others because he can actually retain memories from his past two lives. The goat, who can barely remember what he ate for breakfast, tells her that he doesn't even have the memory of one. The principal insists that she is absolutely sure about him being a third-timer because she sensed some strange energy from him during his fight. This walking farm animal still doesn't understand anything, so she gives up and tells him to head to his dorm with his stupid sister. The next day in class, some random guy shows up and calls Moroha and Shizuno to follow him. He takes them to a terrace, and instead of throwing them off like he should, he starts apologizing. Turns out the ugly bum who fought Moroha yesterday was his younger brother. He then starts complimenting Moroha's skills, which is a mistake because now the cow thinks he's talented. The guy then offers him a spot in his special group that fights deadly monsters. He explains that they only fight once a month, but it's dangerous and some people have died. Before he even finishes, Moroha hears the amount of money involved and immediately accepts. The goat has no survival instincts. Shizuno also agrees, and the guy tells her that she'll be kept in reserve for now. Suki, who has been eavesdropping like the nosy pigeon she is, immediately rushes to the rooftop. She demands to be taken in as well. The guy, showing an appropriate level of disrespect, tells her that he doesn't even know who she is. Then, just to make it worse, he tells her that she isn't even good enough to be kept in reserve. Maybe she should go and make TikTok videos instead. Suki, now humiliated, storms off, probably to cry in a corner somewhere. Later, the guy takes Moroha and Shizuno to meet the other members of the group. Like kindergartners reciting the alphabet, the group chants some weird pledge, and then training begins. Moroha, being the weak farm animal that he is, gets worked to exhaustion. As he walks back, whining like a baby goat, Suki appears and accuses them of keeping her waiting. She excitedly tells them she found the cheapest restaurant in town and invites Moroha to dinner. Before he can respond, Shizuno shuts her down, saying they're too tired for her nonsense. Moroha, of course, is ready to go, but Shizuno keeps pushing Suki away, telling her that unlike her, they actually have jobs. Suki, desperate and clingy, asks if she can at least hang out with them during breaks. When Moroha hesitates, she runs away in embarrassment. Moroha, feeling a little guilty, scolds Shizuno for being too harsh and chases after Suki. Seeing her cry makes him feel bad, so he offers to hang out with her the next day during his break. The next day, Suki drags Shizuno to the mall to help her pick a gift for Moroha. They go to a bunch of stores, but Suki, being as indecisive as ever, still can't choose anything. They decide to take a break and go outside for some sweets. But just as they do, the sky darkens and suddenly a giant snake-like monster emerges from the water. The entire city descends into chaos as people scream and run for their lives. A little boy is left behind crying while Suki and Shizuno freeze in fear. Suki, despite being terrified, doesn't want to stay a coward forever. She takes out her dog tag and releases her sword, ready to face the monster. She tells Shizuno to take the boy to safety while she charges at the snake. Somehow she manages to land a huge slash on it, but the thing barely flinches. It gets ready to attack her, but before it can, Shizuno steps in and unleashes her ice magic. Suki and Shizuno decide to fight together, leading the snake into the mall. Shizuno fires a barrage of ice beams while Suki continues to cut into it. Just as they think they might have a chance, more snake heads emerge from the ground. Turns out this isn't just any snake, it's a hydra. Suki gets thrown to the ground and one of the heads prepares to release a poisonous gas attack. Shizuno, proving she's the real MVP, jumps in front of her and starts turning to stone. Meanwhile, Moroha is with the special forces, watching like the useless farm animal he is. He begs them to help, but they refuse, saying that even an army of 100 wouldn't be enough to defeat a 9-headed hydra. Moroha, instead of realizing that this is a lost cause, starts thinking about his childhood trauma. Of course, now is the perfect time for flashbacks. He remembers watching his parents being taken to the emergency room and suddenly decides he's not going to lose anyone else. He screams at the group for being cowards and runs off to save his girls. Meanwhile, Suki holds the half-stone Shizuno in her arms as the hydra wraps its tongue around her, ready to eat her. She cries for Moroha, and just in time, the goat arrives and slashes the hydra's tongue. He then stabs one of its eyes and continues attacking. Unfortunately, the hydra is built differently and overpowers him, but the farm animal is too stubborn to stay down. Shizuno, barely able to speak, tells him that he has another power. Moroha, finally remembering his other past life, starts drawing spells in the air while dodging the hydra's attacks. The hydra swallows him whole, but this goat refuses to die. He finishes his spell from inside and blows up one of the hydra's heads from within. Now, fully in his element, he condenses a fire attack into a small ball. With a final charge, he obliterates the hydra with one powerful strike. The severed snake heads fall to the ground in slow motion. Later, the Special Forces captain, having heard about Suki's bravery, finally decides to let her join the team, but of course only as a substitute. Suki doesn't care though. She jumps in excitement because now she gets to spend more time with Moroha. The goat, as usual, has no idea what's going on. The next day, these three disasters sit in a restaurant talking about the hydra incident. The principal, in her infinite wisdom, told the media that all three of them took down the hydra together, when in reality Moroha did all the work. Suki is fuming because this cow of a man just got robbed of his credit. Moroha, being the idiot he is, says it wasn't a big deal. Shizuno tells him that the hydra was so powerful that only an S-rank hero could defeat it alone, which means Moroha actually did something useful for once. Just as they are discussing this nonsense, some blonde weirdo struts into the restaurant and plops down at the table next to them. He looks like he got lost on his way to a fashion magazine shoot. He speaks English, which confuses the poor waitress. And just when Suki steps in to help, the guy switches to Japanese, making her regret trying to be useful. He orders like he's in some high-end coffee shop, and Suki loses her patience, telling him to take his nonsense somewhere else because they don't serve his fantasy drinks here. Moroha, being the usual weakling, tries to stop her from attacking this guy, but Suki decides to teach him a lesson instead. She serves him a beautiful-looking drink, claiming it's the chef's special. The guy takes one sip and spits it out like he just drank liquid regret because it smells like someone mixed chlorine and sewer water together. Suki and the chef exchange a thumbs up while Moroha, ever the babysitter, runs to get tissues for the guy. That's when things get weird. Moroha suddenly feels like time has stopped, only to realize the blonde weirdo is behind him, moving so fast that everything else seems frozen. The guy appears in front of Moroha, ready to punch his dumb face, but stops at the last moment, reversing his ability, and disappointed, the guy leaves and everyone is left wondering what just happened. Shizuno, suddenly having a light bulb moment, recognizes him as Edmund, an S-rank hero and the leader of England's special forces. Turns out Moroha's fight with the Hydra has reached the entire world, and now every S-rank hero wants to meet him, probably to see if this clown is actually worth the hype. The next day, they head to the training arena and meet a tiny gremlin of a girl who kissed Moroha the other day. She finally introduces herself as Maya, a relative of the principal. Apparently, she awakened her powers at a young age, so she doesn't get to go to school like a normal kid. Shizuno knows her, and when Moroha asks how, she casually drops the bomb that her brother is the school's chairman. With that, they move on to their completely useless practical class, where the first and second year students have a joint session. That's when some second-year fool named Kami, who is also a member of the Special Forces, decides he needs to act like the biggest crybaby in the universe. He's salty because Moroha has been getting all the attention, so he challenges him to a duel. Edmund, who is also there, looks like he's already bored of this nonsense. Kami goes full drama mode, summons his suit, pulls out his staff, and scribbles some level 2 spell, sending a fire beam at Moroha. But of course, our dumb goat blocks it with ease. In return, Moroha scribbles a level 3 spell and obliterates the guy's attack, making him look even more pathetic than he already is. After that mess, Moroha goes to see the principal, but she's not there. Instead, he finds Maya, who basically just called him over because she wanted to meet him. To keep him from leaving, she starts spilling secrets about Shizuno and her brother. Apparently, Shizuno's grandpa was the guy who threw all his dirty money into building the school, and her family has been hoarding important positions ever since. Her brother, being the power-hungry leech he is, has been using her as a tool to climb the ranks. Later, Moroha takes a nap outside like the lazy cow he is, and Shizuno sits next to him, admiring him for some reason. She lays down next to him and he dreams of his past life where he was some overpowered ice mage who could freeze entire kingdoms in the blink of an eye. In that life, Shizuno was the witch of the netherworld and his lover, and they ruled over a frozen kingdom together. Moroha wakes up, thinking the dream felt a little too real, and then finds Shizuno literally lying on top of him. He freaks out and jumps away like the scared little goat he is, but she just keeps flirting with him aggressively. Before things can get any weirder, Suki arrives and starts yelling at them for being disgustingly lovey-dovey in public. That evening, Moroha gets dragged to Shizuno's place for dinner with her brother, who, surprise surprise, is another manipulative control freak. The guy tries to push Shizuno onto Moroha, and then starts talking about what it takes to be an S rank. Turns out the requirement is to defeat a monster that supposedly can't be beaten one-on-one. Moroha, having the IQ of a potato, is still clueless, so the brother explains that defeating the Hydra means he's eligible to be S rank. Moroha insists that it was a team effort, but the brother, showing zero care for his own sister, says he'll only certify Moroha if the girls admit he did everything alone. Shizuno immediately objects, warning that if Moroha becomes an S rank, he'll lose all his freedom and basically become a corporate puppet. Her brother, being a walking red flag, tells her to shut up because her opinion doesn't matter in family matters. Later, Shizuno apologizes for having such a trash family. Moroha, still being dumb, asks why her room looks so plain. She sadly explains that she's not allowed to decorate it or have hobbies because her family controls every aspect of her life. Thinking about her past life, she remembers being a literal slave forced to clean floors and feed prisoners. That's when she met the past life version of Moroha, who was locked up as the most dangerous criminal. He taught her magic and she fell in love with him, which is probably why she tolerates his stupidity now. To lighten the mood, she takes him to the balcony and they enjoy each other's company. Moroha, remembering his dream, wants to make a move, but as usual, he's too much of a coward. After that, the butler drops Maroha off at his neighborhood with some expensive food, but he soon realizes he's being followed. He turns around and tells the stalker that he doesn't want to fight and they should settle things peacefully. But peace is never an option. The stalker rips off her dog tag, summons her weapon, and lunges at him. Maroha dodges like the slippery little worm he is, but his food isn't so lucky. His free meal gets destroyed, and now he's actually mad. He pulls out his sword and clashes with the stalker, only to realize mid-fight that it's actually a woman. She smirks, splits her weapon into dual blades, and keeps attacking, saying she's going to prove he's not worth all the hype. Maroha blocks her attacks and she fires a green blast at him. Suddenly he remembers another past life, scribbles some spell nonsense, counters her attack with a powerful wind blast and knocks her to the ground. Instead of continuing the fight, she runs away. The blonde fancy pants Edmund had sent his combat butler to attack Maroha just to test his strength. But after watching Maroha flop around like a fish out of water, Edmund is deeply disappointed. He turns to Shizuno's brother and says, yeah, this cow isn't S-rank material. But Shizuno's brother, who clearly has no shame, insists that Maroha took down the Hydra alone. Edmund, who actually has functioning eyes, disagrees. He thinks Maroha was just some lucky goat standing near two competent girls who did most of the work. The next day, Maroha drags his useless self back to his dorm room only to find Maya waiting for him. She announces that she's his new roommate now, and if he wants, Maroha, the dumbest mammal in existence, tells her to leave, but she informs him that this was the principal's decision. That night, the poor fool ends up sleeping on the same bed as her, probably fearing the FBI will kick down his door any second. Meanwhile, Shizuno's brother decides to do what he does best, ruin lives. He tells her she's going to study abroad in England. Since England doesn't have many talented mages, they're desperate for fresh blood, and Edmund saw potential in her. Shizuno, who finally realizes her brother is the worst, argues, but he just shuts her down like always. Instead of flipping him off and walking away like any sane person would, she sadly goes to school where she sees Maroha. Seeing his dumb cow face makes her smile, but that happiness is short-lived when she finds out Maya has moved in with him. Great, now she's mad and jealous. Later they have lunch together and Satsuki proudly presents her sandwiches, taking the opportunity to mock Maya's lunch like a school bully. The two girls get into an argument, while Shizuno takes this as the perfect moment to casually feed Maroha some half-eaten bread. Satsuki, being the jealous gremlin she is, accuses Maroha of cheating. To make her stop whining, he feeds her his hot dog, which she swallows whole like she's trying to win a food-eating contest. Shizuno watches them, clearly regretting her life choices. The next day, Maya rushes to them with an emergency. Shizuno is being forced to leave for England. Maroha, for once in his life, decides to do something useful and tries to contact her. He calls her house while she's having a miserable dinner with Edmund and her garbage brother, pretending to be the principal because apparently no one questions voices anymore. He tricks her brother into letting her answer. Shizuno is shocked to hear his voice, and when he asks why she didn't come to school, she tries to lie, saying she has a cold. Maroha, the one time he uses his brain, calls her out. Finally, she admits she's leaving for England. Maroha asks if this is what she wants. She explains her situation, but he tells her to ignore her selfish brother. She insists she has no choice. As she talks, she thinks about her past life, where she was literally branded as a slave. Nothing has changed. She's still a prisoner, except now it's her family controlling her. Tears fall as she tells Maroha she'll be fine and hangs up, then returns to dinner pretending nothing happened. Her brother, proving once again he is the worst human alive, immediately starts trying to pimp her out to Edmund. Suddenly, the butler announces they have guests. Shizuno's brother tells him to get rid of them, but before that can happen, Maroha comes crashing through the window like a lunatic. Shizuno's brother, obviously furious, threatens to get him arrested for trespassing, but Maroha, being the goat he is, tells him to shut up. He turns to Edmund and argues that taking Shizuno is a mistake because she's not worth the trouble. He then declares that he, the useless cow himself, took down the Hydra alone. Shizuno, proving once again that she's the only person with common sense, reminds him that if he becomes S-rank, he'll lose his freedom and become a national weapon. She starts crying, asking why he's willing to throw his life away for her. She says they could just meet again after she finishes studying. Maroha, still not using a single brain cell, says, he doesn't care about details and just wants her to be honest. Finally, Shizuno breaks down and confesses she wants to stay. She rushes toward him, feeling the invisible chains of her family's control break. He pulls her into a dramatic hug, just like in their past lives. Then, like the absolute maniac he is, he grabs her and jumps out the window. Her brother tries to stop them, but too bad. Satsuki and Maya arrive in the car, and Moroha jumps in with Shizuno. Of all the possible drivers, they somehow let Maya take the wheel. She floors it like she's in a Fast and Furious movie, probably with zero idea how brakes work. Back inside, Shizuno's brother demands that Edmund chase them, but Edmund sighs and gives chase, and his butler attacks the car, sending it spinning. Moroha uses his chains to stop them from flipping over, but now Edmund and his combat mate are here to fight. Edmund demands Shizuno be returned, but Moroha refuses and challenges him to a duel instead. Edmund, probably bored out of his mind, agrees. The fight starts and Edmund summons his sword, flexing about how big it is. He charges and somehow Moroha blocks the attack, but when he tries to strike back, Edmund just catches his sword with his bare hands. Clearly, this man is on another level. Meanwhile, the maid is wiping the floor with Satsuki and Shizuno. Moroha tries using magic, but Edmund walks right through it, completely unfazed. Moroha, being the slow-witted cow he is, asks what kind of sorcery this is. Edmund explains that by concentrating his magic, he becomes invincible for a few seconds. Moroha tries another attack, but Edmund sends him flying. Just when things look bad, Maya steps in and creates a magic field that prevents injuries. Moroha, finally confident, powers up. He dodges Edmund's next attack and enchants his sword with flames. When he swings, he actually manages to break Edmund's sword, shocking everyone, but before he can get cocky, Edmund just pulls out another weapon like he's in a video game and equips a full suit of armor with a shield. The fight continues, with Moroha trying his hardest to land a hit while Edmund just blocks everything. Eventually, Moroha dents Edmund's helmet, making him mad. Edmund retaliates with a furious counterattack, and Moroha realizes he needs a miracle. Suddenly, his memories of his past life hit him like a truck. He remembers Shizuno standing by his side even when he destroyed entire nations for fun. With new determination, he jumps into the air and starts scribbling an extremely powerful spell. Shizuno recognizes it as a forbidden technique from their past. Edmund, now actually interested, watches as Moroha finishes the spell. Then Moroha unleashes a massive icy dragon that freezes everything in sight. Edmund, standing in its path, laughs and declares that he's found the 7th S-rank hero right before he turns into an icicle. Later that night, the gang meets at the principal's house. Maya helps heal their injuries, while Moroha smugly announces that he didn't actually defeat Edmund, just frozen him in place. Right on cue, Edmund arrives, defrosted and impressed. He admits his loss, says he'll cancel Shizuno's transfer, and finally, after all this nonsense, nominates Moroha for S rank before leaving. Moroha, the clumsiest goat alive, somehow won again. Shizuno tells the human punching bag, Moroha, that her brother gave her some world-class life advice. If she can't go to England with Edmund, she should stay close to Moroha and him. This poor girl has been cursed with the worst family ever. Moroha, being the absolute barn animal that he is, just laughs and says that works for him. Clearly, this cow has no respect. Nearly a month after that disaster, the Special Forces leader gathers the group and announces that they'll have a summer camp on a small island. Everyone gets excited because nothing screams intense warrior training like a beach vacation. The leader warns them to behave, but as if that's going to happen. Suki, always scheming, decides to get a swimsuit so scandalous that it will finally make the rock-headed Moroha notice her. She then laughs like a maniac at her own terrible plan, as if she just discovered fire. Meanwhile, spoiled Princess Shizuno is drowning in options because, of course, she has an entire wardrobe dedicated to every possible occasion. It must be exhausting being this rich and indecisive. While the girls are planning their swimsuit-related attacks, Moroha, the human equivalent of a soggy cardboard box, wanders into a store to buy his own swimsuit. There he spots a girl named Momo struggling to pick one. Instead of minding his own business like a normal person, this goat decides to step in and pick a swimsuit for her. Predictably, Momo turns red and runs away in embarrassment because having a random cow pick out your clothes is not an everyday experience. Finally, the students assemble in front of the school. The principal, always extra, scribbles some spells and teleports everyone to the summer camp. Moroha gets a call from Edmund about some big S-rank meeting. While that nonsense is happening, the students send their beach photos to the principal, who is busy flying somewhere because work never stops for this guy. Meanwhile, Suki has apparently been sneaking away with Moroha every night at the camp. But before anyone gets any funny ideas, it's not for romance, it's for training. Yes, instead of enjoying a tropical paradise, Suki is out here sweating buckets, trying to surpass Momo. This triggers another one of Moroha's unnecessary past life flashbacks. He suddenly remembers how in his previous life, he kept leaving Suki behind to protect her. Clearly, history is repeating itself because she's still a weakling. He tells her to quit this ridiculous idea of beating Momo because, let's be honest, she's got the fighting skills of a limp noodle. But Suki, desperate as ever, begs him to help her train. He finally agrees, probably just to make her stop talking, but makes sure to remind her that she's still likely going to lose. The next day, Suki shows off her superior barbecue skills, proving that her true calling in life is grilling meat, not fighting. Meanwhile, Moroha, the village idiot, is talking to some guy about the S-rank meeting when Kami, the local troll, interrupts to mock him. Apparently, there's a chance that Moroha's promotion might get cancelled. Honestly, at this point, it wouldn't be surprising. The man is about as impressive as a wet paper towel. At night, training continues. Moroha tries to teach Suki how to run on water, which is a hilarious idea. Let's be real, she's barely managing solid ground. As expected, she fails spectacularly multiple times. Moroha, feeling the need to make an inspirational speech, which no one asked for, goes on about willpower. He acts like he's some wise mentor, but in reality, he's just a guy who got lucky in past lives. The camp nears its end and the students gather to watch fireworks. It's a heartwarming moment until you remember that these are the same people who have been trying to kill each other in training. They also have fun with sparklers, making the entire evening feel like a kindergarten field trip. Moroha, once again proving he has zero attention span, decides to go for a walk alone, because wandering off in the middle of the night is always a brilliant idea. Eventually, he runs into Shizuno, who is wearing a kimono. She reveals that this was all Suki's idea, probably another scheme to Moroha, because apparently subtlety is dead. They hang out for a bit watching the moon, and Moroha, the king of delayed reaction, suddenly apologizes for not spending more time with her earlier. This man really operates on a lag. A meeting of all the S-rank heroes is called, and Edmund wants everyone to vote on whether the goat should join their ranks. The Russian and French executives immediately turn their noses up and vote against him, while the just sits on the fence like a confused chicken. Japan, on the other hand, is all in, bragging that the goat defeated a 9-headed hydra in mere seconds. The Russian and French executives demand proof, but since nobody had the foresight to record the goat's WWE-style beatdown, they just scoff and call everyone gullible. Edmund tries to vouch for the goat, explaining that he got clapped in a fair fight, but before he can continue, the Japanese executive suddenly clutches his chest like an old man who just saw his hospital bill. He gasps out that a monster is coming. As if on cue, alarms start wailing. The monster makes its grand entrance, and it's an absolute nightmare, about 300 meters long, looking like a horrifying mix between goat droppings and a crab. The Special Forces captain lets everyone know that the hydra the goat took down was basically an insect compared to this absolute abomination. The monster is charging straight for them, but instead of planning to fight, the captain makes a bold decision. They're retreating. That's right, the fearless warriors are packing up and running like track stars. Some students protest, but then a helicopter monitoring the monster gets swatted out of the sky like a mosquito. That's enough motivation for everyone to suddenly agree that evacuation sounds like a fantastic idea. Callie, proving once again that he's built for flight rather than fight, is the first to bounce, and the others follow soon after. Even the goat tells his girls to pack up and go. Back at the meeting, the Russian lady blocks the Japanese executive from leaving and insists that the goat should prove his worth by taking down the monster. The French executive, never one to miss an opportunity to be a menace, agrees and knocks the Japanese executive out cold with a sleep spell. Meanwhile, helicopters circle the island, blasting evacuation orders while the goat makes up his mind. He's staying. His girls, because they're just as reckless, refuse to leave without him. The captain, remembering how the goat pulled off a miracle against the Hydra, decides to stay too. Eventually, the rest of the special forces follow because apparently everyone has a death wish. Swords are drawn and the group recites their dramatic pledge like they're about to film a superhero movie. The monster finally appears in all its disgusting glory, and the captain notices that it seems to be attracted to sound. Since it's heading for the lighthouse, he plans to use that fact against it. The strategy is set. Mages will launch long-range attacks while Maya shields them, warriors will attack up close, and the goat, along with the captain, will go for the finishing move. Solid plan, right? Wrong. The moment the monster arrives, the waves it causes knock out the island's power, meaning the siren they were supposed to use as bait is useless. The beast stops in confusion, but before anyone can think of a solution, Kami appears out of nowhere and starts shooting fireworks at it like it's New Year's Eve. Naturally, this dumb move works, and the monster locks onto him. The second he sees its nightmare fuel of a face up close, he books it running faster than he's ever run in his life. Shizuno quickly scribbles some magic nonsense and launches an ice attack, freezing the monster's leg. The rest of the group follows with elemental attacks, and they actually manage to slice off one of its legs. But before they can celebrate, the wound bursts open, spilling out tiny, wriggling, nightmare fuel, maggot-like mini-monsters. Now everyone has double the problem. While they're dealing with the little creeps, the captain leaps at the big one, remembering how he's been getting bodied by the goat in training. He once asked the goat how to get stronger, and the goat, in his infinite wisdom, told him it was all about spirit. With that in mind, the captain charges in with the power of determination, managing to take out another leg. Meanwhile, the goat, being the weirdo he is, decides this is the perfect time for a musical performance. He blasts motivational music so loudly that the monster instantly turns its attention to him. He then summons his sword, scribbles a spell, and coats his blade in black flames before charging in like an overpowered RPG character. With a well-placed attack, he slices off one of the monster's pincers. The rest of the team keeps fighting the mini-monsters, while Momo informs the captain that the beast's left leg is gone, and they should go for the torso next. Unfortunately, the monster decides to level up its horror factor by sprouting multiple ugly heads all over its body. The captain takes one look and immediately realizes they're screwed. He orders Momo to retreat with the rest of the group. Before they can escape, the monster lets out an ear-splitting shriek that sends everyone to the ground. Even the goat, who manages to throw up a barrier, struggles to keep standing. Suki, channeling the power of dumb determination, remembers the goat's words and suddenly goes berserk, deciding she can take the maggots on by herself. She starts hacking through them like she's playing Fruit Ninja in nightmare mode. Momo rushes to the goat, telling him that Suki is out of control. Meanwhile, the monster starts shifting its attention to her. The goat realizes she's in danger and orders Momo to help her while he deals with the big beast alone. He jumps onto its disgusting back, wondering how to defeat it. Just then, the god of plot armor blesses him with a memory of a forbidden spell from his past life. With renewed confidence, he shoves his sword into the monster's back and starts carving something. Meanwhile, Maya throws up a barrier to shield the team. The monster takes a deep breath, clearly preparing another devastating shriek. The goat, now powered by the unbreakable bond of friendship and anime logic, suddenly gets a miraculous energy boost. Turns out he wasn't just swinging his sword randomly, he was drawing an entire magic circle. He slams his blade into the center, and the whole thing lights up. Within seconds, the monster explodes into nothingness, erased from existence. Back at the meeting, the Japanese executive wakes up just in time to see the monster disappear from the radar. He immediately starts boasting about the goat's victory, rubbing it in the faces of the French and Russian executives. Meanwhile, back on the island, Maya tends to the injured while the goat takes a breather with Suki. The cow Maroha finds a love letter in his locker. The poor guy panics like he just found a tax bill, but curiosity wins, and he decides to meet the sender behind the gym. It turns out the sender is a new Russian transfer student. She walks right up to him and declares that she fell in love with him at first sight. The goat is confused because he's pretty sure he has never met her before, but she doubles down and says she fell in love with him right now. His tiny brain struggles to process this nonsense. She gets straight to the point, says she loves him, and asks him to be her boyfriend, like they're signing a business contract. The goat doesn't buy it. He's convinced she's plotting something, but she assures him she just wants his babies. His soul leaves his body for a moment. To her disappointment, he rejects her on the spot. She immediately spirals into depression and starts talking about ending her life. Now he feels bad, so he offers to be her friend instead. She pouts but takes the offer. Later, the new girl walks into class and all the boys start drooling like idiots. She introduces herself as Elena. Suki, the local clown, waves her hand and asks about Elena's last name and if she got it from her dad. Without skipping a beat, Elena says her dad went out to get milk and never came back, so she has no idea. The orphanage just slapped a random last name on her. The classroom mood turns into a funeral real quick, but Elena shrugs it off and says she still has a younger brother, so she's not alone. Shizuno, of course, has to cause problems and gets up to interrogate Elena like she's on trial for war crimes. She accuses her of being a spy, a kidnapper, or even an assassin. Everyone is shocked. Their useless teacher just stands there watching like this is a soap opera. Elena proudly announces that she's here to make Moroha her man. Suki explodes with rage while the other guys start teasing the goat for being some kind of Rizzlord. Suki barks that no one is allowed to date Moroha, but Elena, being built differently, starts flirting with Suki instead and asks for permission. The clown almost falls for it before Shizuno jumps in to save what's left of her dignity. The nonsense goes on while their teacher probably questions their career choices. Later at the Special Forces Club, Suki and the goat watch two members spar. The girl gets thrown to the ground but gets back up like a champ. Meanwhile, Momo nervously asks Moroha about the foreign student confessing to him. The cow wonders how the hell she knows about it, but Maya shows up and says the entire school already does. Even the principal knows and tells Moroha to treat Elena well. The goat is losing control of his life. In the evening, as Moroha walks back to his dorm, he finds Elena waiting at the gate. Shizuno and Suki immediately go into guard dog mode, but Elena boldly asks him on a date like it's a duel. Suki refuses to let him go alone and declares that she'll be tagging along. Shizuno says she's got better things to do and leaves. The next day, Elena arrives for the date wearing a Catgirl-made outfit. She starts acting like a degenerate weeb, and when she realizes anime isn't real, she enters depression mode again. The goat unfortunately has to comfort her. Suki calls and sadly says she can't make it because she has to help her senior cook. Now it's just Moroha and Elena. She holds his hand and drags him to McDonald's. She's never had a burger before, so the goat asks if she likes it. She takes one bite and says it's bland. Apparently, she never had time to stand in lines. He thinks it's because she was busy with school. He tells him there was no school where she grew up, only military training. Trying to salvage the date, Moroha suggests they go out more so she can have fun. Elena is surprised that he doesn't suspect her of anything. She asks if he thinks she's dangerous. The goat shrugs and says unless she's here to kill him, then it's fine. Elena just smiles, totally not suspicious at all. They head to a photo studio and take some pictures. Then they go to an arcade where the goat wins her a cute doll. At the movies, Elena suddenly decides to go full Netflix and chill right there in public. Meanwhile, Shizuno is on call with one of Edmund's servants. She asks about Elena, and the girl casually drops the bomb that Elena is a cold-blooded assassin. Shizuno is stunned. That night, Elena sits in her room when a talking crow flies in. It turns out she's on a mission from the Russian S-rank executive. The crow tells her that her job is to eliminate Moroha by any means necessary. Elena replies that Moroha's weakness is his family, but the crow orders her to seduce him first and make herself his weakness. If she succeeds, she'll get to see her little brother again. The next day, Elena finds a note in her locker. It's from Shizuno asking to meet. When Elena arrives, Shizuno wastes no time exposing her real identity. Elena is an assassin who takes out superhumans on command. Shizuno tells her there's nothing to explain because she's about to take her down right now to protect the goat. The fight begins. Shizuno scribbles some magic, sending ice shards at Elena. She dodges most but gets hit and starts freezing, but she breaks free. Shizuno keeps attacking, forcing Elena to go all out. Elena rips off her dog tag and summons her weird-looking sword. She absorbs Shizuno's attacks and charges. Shizuno zaps her with lightning, but Elena nullifies it like it's nothing. Then the ice dragon swoops in, but Elena counters and leaps up, destroying the dragon like she's in a final boss battle. Shizuno loses her staff and realizes she is now in deep trouble. Elena points her sword at her and warns her to forget everything and stay out of her way. If she interferes with her mission, she will die. Shizuno, not backing down, asks what happens if she refuses. Elena answers by stabbing her in the leg and dropping her to her knees. Then, just to be extra petty, Elena announces that she's going to leave a scar on Shizuno's face so that she'll never be able to show it to Moroha again. But Shizuno, bleeding out, laughs and says that the goat won't hate her just because of a scar. This annoys Elena. Just then, a teacher happens to walk by and sees the fight. Elena makes a quick getaway. Shizuno sits there realizing that deep down, Elena still has some hope of redemption. But for now, she's still a problem, and at school the next day, the cow Maroha notices that both Shizuno and Elena are missing. This empty-headed grass muncher finally realizes something is wrong, so in the evening he waddles over to Shizuno's house to check on her. He sees her legs are injured and with his 2 brain cells working overtime, asks what happened. She tells him she's fine and then casually drops a bombshell. Apparently there's a group of Russian assassins called man-eaters that feast on the mana of magic people like them. Oh, and by the way, Edmund also got whooped by one of them. The goat's tiny mind struggles to process all this, but then Shizuno finishes him off by revealing that Elena is a man-eater. She also tells him about their duel from yesterday. The cow is now officially concerned, his little goat heart pounding in confusion. He hugs Shizuno tightly, telling her to be careful. Then, with the power of wishful thinking, he decides that Elena must be a good person deep down. Meanwhile, Elena is in her room, injured, dreaming about finding her brother, but she is rudely awakened by a talking cat. The feline menace tells her that Maroha now knows the truth about her. At that moment, outside her dorm, the dumb cow and his emotional support Chihuahua, Suki, arrive and ring the doorbell. Elena, in true dramatic fashion, doesn't answer, so Suki does what any rational person would do. Opens the window and lets herself in. With no choice left, Elena lets them inside. Suki gets to work preparing dinner, while Maroha, the walking disappointment, tries to heal Elena's wounds. At night, she falls asleep crying, and when she wakes up, she finds the goat has also passed out while holding her hand. Great, now he's just an overgrown stuffed animal. The next day, Maya and Momo show up to help Elena recover. Well, that's the idea, but Momo, instead of cooking, starts a fire. Clearly, survival skills are not this group's strong suit. Suki takes over and prepares Russian dishes to make Elena feel better. As the evening rolls in, a girl from the Special Forces visits Elena and suggests she consider joining the Japan branch after graduation. Sounds great, but the goat has already arrived, and the moment she sees him, Elena rushes to welcome him. While pretending to be casual, she secretly asks him to take her on a date next week. The dumb cow, against all logic and reason, agrees. A week later, just as promised, Maroha takes Elena on a date to a sports park. Meanwhile, Shizuno, who apparently has nothing better to do, gets worried about him. She calls the goat, but of course this grass-brained creature doesn't pick up. So she calls Suki instead and finds out about his little date. At the park, Elena decides that now is the perfect time for a dramatic reveal. She takes out her dog tag and confesses that she's a man-eater. The walking haystack barely manages to block her blows with his sword. The fight goes on, and the goat, finally using his eyes, realizes that she is actually really strong. Their swords clash and the goat gets another surprise. She can absorb mana from his weapon. Great, now he's getting robbed mid-fight. In retaliation, he throws a fire beam at her, but she swats it away like an annoying fly. Each time their swords meet, his sword becomes more useless. He's basically swinging a stick at this point. Still, the goat, fueled by sheer stubbornness, keeps attacking. But Elena keeps absorbing his mana and then kicks him straight in his udder-like chest. The fight continues, but the goat is just defending at this point. Then, in the middle of getting whooped, he suddenly remembers his past life as a swordsman. Congratulations. It only took a near-death experience to activate his brain. With his new energy boost, he charges at her like a farm animal on steroids. Meanwhile, outside the park, Suki is having her own battle against the Special Forces girl. This girl came with Shizuno, but Suki blocked her from entering the park. The girl breaks Suki's sword, but Suki, being built differently, just blocks the next attack with her bare hands and destroys the girl's weapon. The Special Forces girl, now completely useless, gives up and hugs Suki. Back to the main fight, Elena is now exhausted and losing. The goat, finally not being completely useless, offers his hand and tells her that he will help her save her brother. Just then, Shizuno arrives, hobbling in with her walking stick and tells them both to stop fighting. Then, the final bombshell drops. Shizuno tells Elena that she doesn't actually have a brother. Just as Elena is trying to process this madness, her talking cat arrives to rub salt in the wound. The cat confirms that Shizuno is right, and that the brother was nothing but an illusion. The little furball admits that it planted the idea in Elena's head to manipulate her into completing her mission. Elena, now heartbroken and emotionally wrecked, doesn't even have time to process the betrayal before the cat takes full advantage of her weakened state. It uses mind control to force her into attacking Maroha. Her eyes turn red, and she goes feral. The goat, now dealing with a mind-controlled assassin, blocks her attacks, but she keeps absorbing his mana. It's a losing battle. However, in typical overpowered protagonist fashion, the goat suddenly gets another absurd power-up. With this newfound strength, he stops her, shatters her sword, and slices off her dog tag, and this releases some ugly creature that was apparently hanging out inside it the whole time. Elena collapses, but before she can hit the ground, the goat rushes up and catches her. He holds her tightly and, in a moment of shocking kindness, offers to be her family. Elena, exhausted, betrayed, and utterly done with life, starts crying as she hugs him. Some days later, the dumbest goat in existence, Moroha, waddles his way to Russia in search of the Lightning Emperor, the Russian executive who forced Elena into becoming a man-eater. This walking disaster somehow stops a car and starts interrogating the man inside. Of course, because his brain is as smooth as a pebble, he has to rely on his phone to translate. When the man learns about who this clueless farm animal is, he immediately rips off his dog tag and lunges at Moroha. Naturally, the goat barely dodges the attack, but suddenly a tiny spark of his past life flickers in his thick skull. This gives him an energy boost, and before he can even process a single thought, his body starts scribbling nonsense in the air. Boom! A thunderstorm attack shoots out, frying the poor guy who was just trying to do his job. Edmund's servant girl, Angela, walks in like she owns the place and asks if the guy is dead. Moroha, pretending to be all noble, assures her that he doesn't take lives, even though he just left that guy looking like overcooked bacon. They hop onto a train where Angela hands him a fake visa and passport because, shocker, this brainless goat didn't think to get legal documents before traveling. As they eat dinner, she vents about how disappointed she is in Edmund, who's busy cooperating in a personal war against the Russian executive. Moroha, in all his infinite stupidity, tells her she doesn't have to help him, but she ignores his words like any sensible person would. Instead, she thinks back to the absolute mess he made interrogating some punk they had captured earlier. Moroha, in all his goat-brained glory, had told the punk he was going to wage war against the Russian executive. Angela had tried to get him to shut up, but does a cow ever listen? Of course not! The punk even laughed in his face, calling him a moron, which was honestly the most accurate description of Moroha ever spoken. But instead of taking the L, this reckless idiot pulled out his sword, stabbed the guy in the gut, and then kicked him to the floor like some kind of edgy anime protagonist. As they continue their meal, Moroha, with the confidence of a man who has never had a coherent plan in his life, explains that his strategy is to take down every single district leader in Russia to get the Lightning Emperor's attention. As expected, just as Moroha predicted, the punk crawls straight to the Lightning Emperor and reports his humiliating defeat. The Russian executive, showing no patience for failures, coldly tells the guy to drop dead and then zaps him with a lightning bolt, ending his life on the spot. That night, Moroha, ever the nosy fool, notices Angela's missing from her bed. He drags his clumsy hooves around the train looking for her and eventually finds her on the phone. Meanwhile, back at the academy, Maya and the other girls discuss how well they're getting along with Elena. They briefly talk about the walking disaster known as Moroha and express their very valid concerns over what kind of mess he's gotten himself into this time. Meanwhile, in another district of Russia, Moroha continues his rampage, defeating more district leaders and even blowing up a whole building just to neutralize an area. This absolute menace keeps up his streak for days, knocking down leaders like bowling pins. At one point, he tells Angela to watch his luggage while he skips off to fight a group of 8 men. Like a true farm animal, he starts running around aimlessly, letting the men chase him until they reach a forest. There, he dramatically challenges them, and one guy jumps down from the sky like he's in an action movie. This guy, Kursin, tells Moroha to go back to Japan because doesn't want unnecessary deaths. At the same time, though, he can't disobey the Lightning Emperor's orders. The fight kicks off with Kursin lunging at Moroha, who immediately realizes he's at a disadvantage in this terrain. Before he can figure out his next move, 2 girls appear out of nowhere and attack him. He barely manages to dodge, but then the twins pull out a classic anime move and start duplicating themselves. He manages to take down one of the clones, but the real twins are now beyond furious. It turns out they want revenge because they believe he's responsible for the punk's death. Moroha doesn't even remember who they're talking about. Before he can deal with them, a massive fire beam comes out of nowhere. This goat-brained fool actually does something heroic for once and pushes the twins out of the way, taking the hit himself. But before he can breathe, a thick mist of poison gas spreads around him. A masked guy appears looking like he just walked out of a carnival and prepares to strike. Moroha, running purely on dumb luck, shoots a magic attack straight into the guy's head, knocking him out cold. Kurson then swoops down from the sky again, clearly determined to finish the fight. Moroha, finally using his last 2 brain cells, jumps up to confront him directly. Kurson charges, but Moroha mumbles some random incantation, launching Kurson straight into the ground, right on top of 2 other girls. At this point, he's taken down 4, leaving just 4 more to go. He then stumbles across another girl and asks why she held back in her attacks. She explains that it's because he saved the twins. The twins, still not over their grudge, come charging at him again. But Moroha, being the absolute blockhead that he is, still doesn't get who they're avenging. He shrugs and with minimal effort throws them both to the ground like rag dolls. That makes 7 down, leaving just 1 more to go. Angela, meanwhile, is up against the last guy. The dude, desperate to turn the tide, pulls out a mirror, revealing the Lightning Emperor on the other side. The Emperor, with all the patience of someone dealing with an absolute buffoon, starts scribbling a death spell. Moroha, in one rare moment of awareness, realizes what's happening. The attack lands, engulfing the idiot goat in an explosion of pure electricity. Angela screams in horror, watching as the biggest fool in existence gets absolutely fried. At night, this cow of a main character, Moroha, starts having nightmares about his past lives with Suki and Shizuno, probably because his tiny brain is finally trying to process some of the chaos he gets himself into. When he wakes up, he remembers the previous night when he got absolutely destroyed by the Lightning Emperor. Turns out he had collapsed like a sack of potatoes, and Angela had to carry his useless body all the way to their cabin and make sure he didn't actually die. Somehow this goat survives yet again and manages to recover from his wounds. Later they meet with the district leader Katya, who tells them she's half Japanese and half Russian. They chat for a bit until she finally gets to the point and asks Moroha for a favor, like this cow needs any more responsibilities. Katya wants him to help free her friend from the Lightning Emperor's control, because apparently getting beaten to a pulp once wasn't enough. Moroha agrees, and they take a train to their next disaster. On the way, Katya explains how the Lightning Emperor collects orphans, forces them to fight each other, and turns the survivors into her personal bodyguards. Classic evil villain behavior. The goat remembers how Elena suffered the same fate and suddenly gets all fired up about the mission. When they finally arrive, the genius decides the best way to protect Katya is to flick her forehead so hard she loses consciousness. That's right, no strategy, no plan. Just knocking people out and hoping for the best. Now that Katya is conveniently asleep and out of the way, Moroha and Angela head to the streets. The goat tells Angela to stay out of the fight because he doesn't want to be distracted protecting her. Angela, obviously more capable than him, ignores his nonsense and follows anyway. Meanwhile, inside the palace, the Lightning Emperor is already onto them. One of her minions reports their arrival and she immediately punishes him for failing. She then steps onto her balcony, uses her magic eyes to locate Moroha, and starts scribbling away like an overpowered anime villain. The sky darkens, lightning crackles, and suddenly she summons an entire army of lightning creatures. Moroha, being the stubborn goat he is, starts slicing through the creatures one by one. But these things are endless. No matter how many he takes down, more keep coming. This absolute barn animal just keeps pushing forward, step by step. While the Lightning Emperor watches in amusement, she's honestly surprised he's holding up against her army. Even her own bodyguard comments that this cow is moving so fast that the lightning monsters can't keep up. She laughs and decides it's time to switch things up. Suddenly, a group of boys and girls appear before him, the orphans. Katya had warned him about this, but seeing them in battle makes him hesitate. One of them tries to attack him, but before he can even react, one of the Lightning Emperor's own monsters turns on the kid. Instead of dodging or letting the problem solve itself, Moroha actually saves the boy. What a shocker. The goat finally does something decent, but this just makes things worse because now the monsters start attacking the orphans instead of him. The Lightning Emperor watches the chaos and laughs like the psycho she is. She keeps sending more creatures, making it clear she doesn't care who wins, as long as there's destruction. Moroha, now in full hero mode, refuses to let. The orphans get hurt. One of them, Yuri, steps forward and uses her magic to freeze him in place. Angela arrives, once again proving she's 10 times more useful than him, but she's not alone. Katya, Suki, and Shizuno also show up, ready to back him up. Katya spots Yuri, but realizes that her friend doesn't recognize her at all. Just as things are about to get worse, Elena suddenly appears through teleportal magic. She wastes no time trying to talk sense into the orphans. She tells them how she was freed from being a man-eater and that they too can break free from the Lightning Emperor's control. Katya rushes to Yuri, desperately trying to make her remember. Elena cuts Yuri's dog tag, and just like that, she finally recalls everything. Angela sees this and immediately tells everyone to focus on taking down the lightning monsters. The entire group bands together, determined to defeat the Lightning Emperor and her army. They start attacking, using their combined efforts and magic to slowly turn the tide of battle. Meanwhile, the Lightning Emperor, realizing she's in trouble, tells her guard to contact the government. Like that's gonna help her now. Then, because villains never know when to quit, she starts singing. Yes, singing, and with that, more lightning bolts rain from the sky, but this time they form something truly terrifying. A gigantic boss-level beast. This thing is so massive that no one can even see its full size. It looms over them, slowly approaching while Maroha and his squad just stare at it in horror. Katya and Shizuno immediately start scribbling spells to counter it. Maroha, now feeling extra heroic, jumps in the air and starts scribbling too. They combine their attacks and fire at the beast, but it barely does anything. Then, the beast responds. With one attack, it literally destroys an entire mountain. Maroha, finally understanding that brute force won't work, suddenly remembers yet another one of his past lives. Like magic, he gets another power boost and starts scribbling with newfound determination. He slams his fist into the ground, creating a massive wave of water. Everyone manages to stay afloat as he taps the water with his feet, sending gigantic water tentacles at the lightning beast. The tentacles wrap around the monster, squeezing tighter and tighter until the entire creature is completely destroyed. As the sky clears, everyone watches in awe. The Lightning Emperor, who thought she was untouchable, is left speechless. Her guards, realizing their leader is useless now, immediately run away. She, however, refuses to give up. She starts scribbling again, determined to take him down no matter what. She summons another thunder dragon, but the goat counters it with a simple water attack. This finally breaks her spirit. She stares in shock, unable to believe she's lost. Now she begs for her life. That's right, after all the cruelty and all the destruction, she suddenly wants mercy, but Maroha, for once, decides to call her out. He reminds her of how she treated her own men, how she forced orphans into battle, and how she laughed while her own creatures attacked her army. She keeps pleading, making excuses, but it only makes him angrier. He lectures her one last time before turning his back on her, leaving her to deal with the consequences. At the academy, the principal gathers everyone and announces that the walking disaster known as Maroha has somehow managed to defeat the Lightning Emperor and is on his way back. The students lose their minds in excitement, but the principal quickly reminds them that only the cow himself will be using teleportation magic. The boys, of course, get jealous because he spent the night in Russia, surrounded by beautiful girls, while they were stuck at school doing absolutely nothing. Meyer is devastated. She won't be seeing the useless goat immediately, and the principal, being the soft-hearted type, hugs and comforts her. Meanwhile, in Russia, Suki and Elena are sneezing their brains out because they caught a cold. Why? Because they got into a ridiculous fight over who had the right to be Moroha's younger sister. Yes, grown girls arguing over being related to a glorified farm animal. Katya, being the responsible one, brings them warm tea, and Suki immediately curses Shizuno for not suffering with them. Shizuno, however, is too busy interrogating the cow himself about his adventures with Angela. The goat tries to explain, but Shizuno is already ahead of him. It turns out Angela has been keeping her updated on everything the entire time. Shizuno then leans in and the barnyard boy decides to bring up a dream he had about his past life with her. Something about a monster snatching away everything he cared about. Shizuno, without missing a beat, suggests that maybe it's not just a memory from the past, but a glimpse of the future, because nothing spells romance like an ominous warning about incoming doom. Meanwhile, at the Japan executive branch, Edmund is watching the aftermath of the battle on TV, clearly wishing he could have seen the idiotic goat in action firsthand. Just as he's making some comments, the executive boss man collapses onto his desk. His assistant, panicking, tells Edmund that this is an alert for something truly terrifying. Back in Russia, the crew is preparing to return to Japan. The girls hop into the teleportation ring, but just as Maroha is about to join them, he gets a call from the executive. It turns out Japan has a new problem, a giant sludge monster wreaking havoc. So instead of returning like a normal person, the goat stays behind to fight. Meanwhile, Suki is the first to arrive at school, followed by the rest of the girls, but Maroha is nowhere to be seen. Maya starts panicking, demanding to know where her beloved cow went. only to find out he's busy in Russia fighting an ugly pile of walking mud. Maya, unable to handle the news, breaks down crying because she can't handle sleeping without her personal farm animal. Suki, being the helpful type, offers to sleep with her instead. Elsewhere, Angela is on the phone with Edmund, who informs her that even though the sludge monster was defeated, the executive's condition is still getting worse. That means bigger problems are on the horizon. He warns her that whatever is coming next is bad enough to knock the big boss unconscious. As promised, Suki invites Maya for a sleepover, but before they can enjoy their night, Momo shows up, crashing the party. Then, as if that wasn't enough, Shizuno arrives, calls the room too small for her taste, and annoys Suki even further. One by one, more girls arrive, turning the quiet sleepover into a full-blown slumber party. Suki, barely holding in her rage, watches as the girls take out their snacks and start having fun. Then, just to make things worse, they decide to have a pillow fight, and of course Suki becomes the main target. The girls take turns pummeling her with pillows while laughing, and for a brief moment Maya forgets her loneliness. At night, when everyone is finally asleep, Maya is still awake. Suki notices and asks what's wrong. Maya tells her she's not feeling lonely anymore. Just then, Suki gets a sudden vision of a monstrous creature, and at the same time, Shizuno bolts upright from her sleep. Something bad is coming. Over at the headquarters, Edmund rushes to meet the executive, who is looking worse than ever. The executive tells him that they're not dealing with an ordinary monster. This time, it's an ancient dragon, and as if on cue, a black hole appears in the sky over Japan, and from it emerges a horrifying, nightmare-inducing dragon. The citizens panic and start running for their lives as emergency alerts blast through the city. Back at school, Shizuno and Suki watch in horror, knowing that the goat is nowhere near them when they need him most. Later, the Special Forces captain gathers the troops and informs them that this dragon isn't like the monsters they've faced before. Its power is unknown, its presence is terrifying, and its timing is absolutely terrible. To make matters worse, Edmund will be joining them soon, meaning the situation is serious. Meanwhile, the cow is still in Russia, waiting for the principal to finish setting up the teleportation portal. Until then, the Special Forces have to hold the fort. With determination, the Special Forces get ready for battle. Angela joins them, and together they recite their pledge before heading out. From a safe distance, they watch the dragon trying to strategize, but the dragon, being the genius predator it is, figures out their plan and takes to the sky, burning everything in its path. Trees, buildings, hopes, and dreams all up in flames. Forced out of hiding, the team runs into the streets with the beast looming overhead. Then, because disaster follows Suki wherever she goes, she trips and falls. Luckily, the rest of the team steps in and blasts the dragon with elemental magic to buy her time. But the dragon isn't just some mindless brute. It activates some fancy magical seals and cancels out their attacks. Shizuno, the only one smart enough to process this, realizes that the dragon can chant in reverse, sending their own spells right back at them. And just like that, their best plan becomes their biggest weakness. Meanwhile, in Russia, the goat is still waiting for teleportation magic when he sees the attack happening live. The moment his eyes land on that dragon, something clicks. Memories of his past lives flood in, and he remembers everything. The same dragon that's attacking Japan right now was the one that burnt Suki to a crisp in his past life. And the same dragon also obliterated Shizuno with its massive tail. This dragon has been messing up his life time after time, and he's not about to let that happen again this time. The Special Forces team somehow survives and charges at the dragon again. One of the girls hurls a giant boulder at it, but the dragon pulls a disappearing act and dodges like it's got plot armor. The team is left staring in shock, and before they can process what just happened, the dragon unleashes a massive fire blast at them. They run for their lives while the students cower inside the school, shaking like leaves. The dragon, being the menace it is, decides to torch the city for fun. People flee in panic while the principal finds a quiet spot to set up a teleportation portal, probably the only useful thing he's ever done. The captain of the Special Forces team jumps onto the dragon's back, ready to land a heroic strike, but the dragon isn't in the mood. It flicks him off like a pesky fly, sending him straight to the ground. Unfortunately, the dragon is not impressed and cancels her spell instantly. The captain scrambles to save her while the dragon turns its attention to Suki. Momo takes the hit instead, proving that being a side character is suffering. The dragon keeps wrecking everything, and Maya almost gets fried, but the principal, somehow still alive, jumps in to take the hit. Maya tries to heal him, but he refuses, telling her to focus on finishing the transportation portal. She gets to work, frantically scribbling magic nonsense. Meanwhile, Suki desperately tries to wake Momo, but Elena steps in, telling her to distract the dragon instead. The beast happily chases them, raining fire down while Maya keeps working. The dragon suddenly lunges at Maya, but Edmund blocks it just in time with his shield. She finally completes the portal, and just like that, Moroha arrives with Katya and Yuri. The goat is back and he's already fuming. Angela asks what kind of dragon they're dealing with, since it's way stronger than anything they've faced. Shizuno realizes the dragon isn't even trying to win, it's just toying with them. Classic villain behavior. Elena collapses and Suki desperately tries to distract the dragon. It blasts fire at her, but Moroha jumps in to save the day. Shizuno and Suki are relieved, but Moroha is too busy glaring at the dragon like it owes him money. He tells everyone to retreat and decides to handle the problem himself, because that always works out so well. The dragon had ruined his past lives, but he refuses to let history repeat itself. He leaps into the air, scribbles some magic, and fuses his energy ball with his sword to create his ultimate weapon. He fires a massive black beam at the dragon and nothing happens. The dragon, being the petty creature it is, reverses the spell right back at him, lets out an ear-piercing screech, forcing everyone to cover their ears. The goat tries to stand up, but his sword shatters in the process. Now he's just an angry guy with no weapon. To make things worse, the dragon spits out a swarm of disgusting wasp-like creatures. Moroha starts swatting them down like a lunatic while the dragon teleports and appears right in front of Shizuno and Suki, and just like that, it turns them to stone. Moroha stands there shaking in shock, watching his girlfriends turn into lawn decorations. Just like his past lives, he's completely useless. He starts wailing like a banshee and transforms out of sheer rage. Edmund, probably the only smart person here, tells everyone that this is the Pandora's box effect, a transformation triggered by despair. Moroha completely loses it and attacks the dragon like a raging beast. Angela warns him to calm down or he'll destroy the city along with the dragon, but the goat is too far gone. He's now just a rampaging maniac, and everyone is terrified. He casts a spell on the dragon's body, ready to end everything in one blast. But just as things reach peak chaos, Shizuno and Suki miraculously regain consciousness and break free from their stone prisons. They remind him that they will always be together in this life or the next. Just like that, he snaps out of his berserk mode and becomes a mix of both his past selves. The Special Force team, now fully healed thanks to Kai, arrives just in time to join the fight. Together they attack the dragon and its swarm of wasps. Moroha watches in shock, and Suki tells him he isn't alone this time. They leap into action while he prepares another spell. The dragon tries to stop them, but the Special Forces and Angela keep it distracted. It lets out another fire blast, but Katya and Yuri block it. Meanwhile, the rest of the school gathers to cheer on the battle, as if this is a sports event. Maya continues healing the principal while watching the insane fight unfold. The dragon lets out another sonic attack, but Edmund saves the team by blocking it. Moroha finishes his spell, and together with Suki and Shizuno, he creates an insanely huge sword. In one final strike, they completely obliterate the dragon in a massive explosion. Everyone watches in awe as the beast is finally defeated. The executive who had been in a coma suddenly wakes up and tells his assistant that he feels better. Clearly, Moroha did his job. A few days later, Edmund and Angela bid farewell to Moroha and the girls as they returned to England. Moroha then asks Suki if she remembers the dragon from her past life. She admits she had recurring dreams about it, and Shizuno immediately mocks her. The two start arguing like usual while Moroha watches, relieved that things are finally back to normal. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to click on this one right here to start the most legendary binge session known to man. Also, if you want to see the full plot-filled scenes, then make sure to subscribe to our Patreon. Link will be in the description below.